Sophia Johnson stepped into the gleaming lobby of her family's corporate headquarters, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, a comforting familiarity in a life otherwise spinning out of control. She adjusted her blazer and forced a practiced smile for the receptionist, hiding the turmoil brewing within her. On the surface, Sophia had it all: a successful career as an investment strategist, a luxurious lifestyle, and a marriage that appeared enviable. Her husband, Ethan Taylor, was the definition of charm, a self-proclaimed entrepreneur who carried himself with confidence. Together, they were the epitome of a power couple, or so everyone believed. But over the past few months, cracks had begun to show in their seemingly perfect union. Sophia's first clue had come in the form of a credit card statement, a transaction for a luxury watch she didn't recognize. When she'd asked Ethan about it, he brushed it off with a laugh. "It's a gift for a client. You know how networking is." His tone was light, but something in his eyes made her stomach twist. She had let it slide, not wanting to seem distrustful. Yet, the unease lingered, growing heavier with each passing day. That evening, as Sophia entered their penthouse apartment, she was greeted by the faint sound of jazz playing in the background. Ethan was in the kitchen, a glass of scotch in hand, his tailored shirt rolled up at the sleeves. He looked up and flashed her the same dazzling smile that had once swept her off her feet. "Busy day?" he asked, setting the glass down. "Always," Sophia replied. Her tone clipped as she placed her purse on the counter. "You?" Ethan shrugged, leaning casually against the counter. "Productive. Closed a deal for one of my projects. Dinner's on the way." Sophia nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She had received a notification earlier that day, an alert for an unusual transaction from their joint bank account. A significant sum had been transferred to an offshore account she didn't recognize. "Ethan," she began, keeping her tone steady, "I noticed a transfer from our account. A large one. Do you know anything about it?" His smile faltered for a split second before he quickly recovered. "Of course. I told you about that. It's for the property development project I'm working on. You really should keep better track of our conversations, sophomore." The subtle condescension in his tone stung, but Sophia didn't push. Not yet. Later that night, as Ethan slept beside her, Sophia lay awake staring at the ceiling. The unease had transformed into a persistent ache, one she could no longer ignore. Something wasn't right. The next morning, Sophia decided to access their financial records directly. She told herself it was just to put her mind at ease, but deep down, she knew she was searching for confirmation of her worst fears. Sitting at her desk, she logged into their shared account. Her pulse quickened as she reviewed the statements, her heart sinking with each line. The transfer wasn't the only questionable transaction. There were others: expensive dinners, lavish gifts, even deposits into an account she didn't recognize. And then she saw it. An account listed in her name but created without her knowledge. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. How had she missed this? How long had Ethan been hiding things from her? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Angela, her best friend from college. Sophia hesitated before answering. "Hey, Ange," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sophia." Angela's voice was warm but tinged with concern. "You've been so hard to reach lately. Is everything okay?" Sophia hesitated, torn between opening up and keeping the facade intact. "Just busy," she replied, forcing a light laugh. Angela wasn't convinced. "You don't sound fine. Look, if something's going on, you can tell me. You know that, right?" For a moment, Sophia considered spilling everything. But then she heard Ethan's voice in her head. "Don't air our dirty laundry to anyone. It's private." "Thanks, Ange," she said finally. "I'll call you soon." As she ended the call, Sophia felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her. She stared at the screen, the damning evidence still open before her. Something was deeply wrong, and for the first time, Sophia couldn't ignore the truth. She wasn't just fighting to protect her finances, she was fighting for her sense of self. And she had no idea how far Ethan had gone to keep his lies hidden. Sophia sat in the stillness of her home office, staring at the glowing laptop screen. The transactions stared back at her, a puzzle she desperately needed to solve. Her fingers trembled as she navigated to the account bearing her name, the one she hadn't opened. She clicked through the details, noting the recent deposits. Each was substantial, and none of it made sense. "Why would Ethan create an account in my name?" she whispered, her voice echoing in the quiet room. Sophia's first instinct was to confront him immediately, but something held her back, a nagging voice warning her that Ethan's charm had always been his strongest weapon. If he was capable of hiding this, what else could he be concealing? Ethan was already home, lounging on the couch with a glass of wine. His posture was relaxed, almost too casual, as if he had no care in the world. Sophia watched him for a moment, feeling a pang of nostalgia for the man she thought she married. "Dinner's in the oven," Ethan said without looking up from his phone. "Thanks," Sophia replied, her tone neutral. She walked into the kitchen, her mind racing. Over dinner, Ethan launched into his usual monologue about his latest project. Sophia barely heard him, her focus instead on his demeanor. His confidence seemed rehearsed, his words too carefully chosen. "What about you?" Ethan asked suddenly, interrupting her thoughts. "How's work?" "It's been busy," Sophia said, her voice measured. "We're launching a new initiative focused on sustainable investments. It's demanding but rewarding." Ethan leaned back, swirling his wine. "Sounds exhausting. Don't you ever feel like, I don't know, taking a break? Enjoying life a little more?" Sophia bristled. "My work gives me purpose. It's not just a job to me." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course it does. You've always been so driven. It's admirable." Sophia forced a smile, but the undercurrent of condescension in his words was impossible to ignore. The next morning, Sophia sat across from Victor Hale, a private investigator recommended by Angela. Victor was a man of few words, his piercing blue eyes scanning her as she explained her suspicions. "You think he's hiding money?" Victor asked, his voice calm and professional. "I don't just think it, I know it," Sophia replied, handing over a folder of documents. "But it's more than that. There's an account in my name, transactions I never authorized. And I can't shake the feeling that there's something bigger going on." Victor nodded, flipping through the papers. "If he's creating accounts in your name, he's likely committing fraud. I'll start by tracing these transactions and digging into his financial history. But if there's anything else you're concerned about, now's the time to tell me." Sophia hesitated before speaking. "There's something else. Ethan, he can be controlling, dismissive. He isolates me from my friends and family. I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like he's trying to control your life," Victor finished for her. Sophia nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. Victor leaned forward, his tone firm but reassuring. "You're doing the right thing, Sophia. Whatever he's hiding, we'll find it." Days passed in tense silence. Sophia kept up appearances, carefully navigating her interactions with Ethan while waiting for Victor's report. Finally, the call came. "Sophia," Victor said, his voice steady, "we've found something." "What is it?" she asked, gripping her phone tightly. "There's a series of transfers linked to an offshore account. The recipient is listed as a shell corporation, but the trail leads back to Ethan. He's funneling money through dummy accounts, and it looks like he's been doing this for a while." Sophia felt her stomach drop. "And the account in my name?" "Same trail. He's using your name to launder money. It's sophisticated, but he left enough breadcrumbs to track." Sophia's mind raced. What does this mean? What's he involved in? "I don't have all the answers yet," Victor admitted. "But whatever it is, it's not legal. I'm also looking into his past. There's something odd about how clean his records are. It feels curated." "Keep digging," Sophia said, her voice firm. "I need to know everything." That evening, Sophia sat at her desk, poring over the information Victor had sent. The transfers, the accounts, the shell corporations. It painted a picture of a man she barely recognized. Angela called, her voice a mix of concern and urgency. "Sophia, you need to get out of there. This isn't just some affair or a midlife crisis. This is criminal." "I can't just leave," Sophia replied, her voice trembling. "He has his hands in everything. Our finances, my reputation, Even my family. I need proof. I need to be smart about this. Angela sighed. Just promise me you'll be careful. I don't trust him, and neither should you. A few nights later, Ethan suggested they go out for dinner at an upscale restaurant. Sophia agreed, knowing she needed to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Over drinks, Ethan began discussing a new business opportunity. It's a partnership with some influential players, he said, his tone casual. Big potential. Sophia studied him carefully. And you're funding this how? Ethan's eyes narrowed, but his smile didn't falter. You don't need to worry about that. I've got it handled. I'm part of this marriage, Ethan. I think I have a right to know, Sophia pressed. Ethan's demeanor shifted. You don't trust me? Sophia hesitated, feeling the tension rise. I just want transparency. That's not too much to ask. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. You've always had this need to control everything. Maybe that's the problem, Sophia. Maybe you should learn to let go. Sophia stared at him, her heart pounding. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his polished facade. Anger, resentment, and something darker lurking beneath. She smiled faintly, masking her fear. Maybe you're right. But in her mind, one thing was clear. Ethan's mask was slipping, and she needed to act fast before it fell completely. Sophia couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in her chest. The more she pieced together about Ethan's financial dealings, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a case of marital dishonesty. It was something far more sinister. Her laptop sat open on her desk, the glow from the screen casting faint light across her darkened office. Victor's latest findings blinked on the screen, each detail more damning than the last. There were documents linking Ethan to multiple accounts registered under aliases, with transactions connected to a company Sophia had never heard of, Carter Development Group. Sophia leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The name Carter stirred something in her memory. She had seen it before but couldn't recall where. A knock at the door startled her. Sophia? Ethan's voice carried through the wood. Quickly, she closed her laptop. Come in. Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the space before landing on her. Working late again? He asked, a faint edge to his voice. Yes, she replied, keeping her tone even. It's an important project. Ethan smirked, leaning against the doorway. You work too hard, sophomore. Sometimes I think you care more about your job than this marriage. Sophia's stomach churned, but she forced a smile. You know how important my career is to me. Well, Ethan said, his tone light but his gaze sharp, don't let it consume you. Marriage is about balance. Sophia nodded, her fingers tightening around the edge of her desk. Good night, Ethan. Good night, he said, lingering for a moment before leaving. As soon as the door clicked shut, Sophia let out a shaky breath. She couldn't afford to slip now. The next morning, Sophia met Victor at a small, unassuming diner far from the upscale circles she and Ethan typically frequented. Victor, with his usual calm demeanor, slid a folder across the table. I found something on Carter Development Group, he said, his voice low. It's a shell company registered to Ethan's alias. It looks like he's been funneling money into it for years. But that's not the interesting part. Sophia's brows furrowed as she opened the folder. What's the interesting part? Lila Carter, Victor said, watching her reaction closely. The name sent a chill down Sophia's spine. Who is she? She's Ethan's ex-wife, Victor explained. They were married 6 years ago. Shortly after their divorce, she disappeared. No one knows what happened to her, but there were rumors, claims of abuse, financial manipulation, even threats. It was never proven, but it's worth noting that Ethan walked away from the marriage with a significant financial settlement. Sophia's hands trembled as she scanned the documents. Why didn't I know about this? Because Ethan buried it, Victor replied. He's careful about what he lets people see. Everything about his past is meticulously curated. Sophia stared at the photo of Lila Carter, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a soft smile. Do you think he? Victor didn't answer immediately. I don't know. But people don't just disappear without a reason. If Ethan is capable of that level of control, he might be capable of worse. That evening, Sophia drove to her parents' estate, her thoughts racing. The weight of everything she learned was too much to bear alone. Her father, Charles, was sitting in the study when she arrived. He looked up from his newspaper, surprised to see her. "Sophia, what brings you here?" "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. Charles set down the paper, his expression growing serious. "What's wrong?" Sophia sat across from him, clutching the folder Victor had given her. "It's about Ethan. There are things I've discovered, things that don't make sense, and I need to know if you knew." Charles frowned, his gaze sharp. "What do you mean? Did you know about his past? About Lila Carter?" Sophia asked, her voice rising with desperation. Charles hesitated, his silence answering the question before he spoke. "We ran a background check on him before the wedding. Yes, we knew about Lila." Sophia's chest tightened. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "We didn't want to interfere," Charles said firmly. "You seemed happy, and we thought he might have changed. But we kept tabs on him, just in case." "Just in case?" Sophia repeated, incredulous. "You knew he might be dangerous, and you still let me marry him?" "We didn't want to drive you away," Charles admitted, his tone regretful. "You were in love, and we thought we could protect you if things went wrong." Sophia stood, her hands trembling. "You should have told me." Her father's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have handled it differently. But it's not too late. We'll help you now. Whatever you need." Sophia nodded, her anger tempered by a flicker of gratitude. When Sophia returned home, she found Ethan sitting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes followed her every move. "Late night?" he asked, his tone casual but laced with suspicion. "Just needed some air," Sophia replied, keeping her tone neutral. Ethan smirked. "You've been distant lately, sophomore. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," she lied. He stood, crossing the room to her. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe we should spend more time together. Take a trip or something. Just the two of us." Sophia forced a smile. "That sounds nice." Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "You're not hiding anything from me, are you?" The question caught her off guard, but she recovered quickly. "Of course not." He stepped closer, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Good. Because you know I'd do anything to protect us?" Sophia nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. Sophia spent the next few nights poring over every document Victor had uncovered. The picture was becoming clearer. Ethan wasn't just a fraud. He was dangerous. One evening, she received an email from Victor. Attached was an old article about Lila Carter. The headline read, "Prominent entrepreneur's ex-wife disappears amid divorce scandal." Sophia's heart sank as she read the details. Lila had filed for divorce, citing financial and emotional abuse. Friends reported that she had been planning to leave the country before she vanished. Ethan had denied any involvement, and the case had gone cold. As Sophia closed the email, she felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't just dealing with a manipulative husband. She was dealing with a man who might stop at nothing to maintain control. Sophia's hands shook as she reread the article about Lila Carter. The words blurred together, each sentence solidifying the creeping realization that her husband was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Ethan wasn't just controlling. He was a man who had already destroyed one life. The silence of the penthouse felt suffocating, the walls closing in on her as the weight of her discoveries pressed down. The next morning, Sophia drove to her family's estate, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The truth about Ethan burned in her chest, fueling her determination to uncover everything he had hidden. Her father had admitted to knowing about Ethan's past, but his explanation still felt hollow. If her parents had known he might pose a threat, why hadn't they done more to protect her? When she arrived, her mother, Margaret, greeted her at the door. Margaret's sharp eyes scanned her daughter's face, her expression softening as she stepped aside to let Sophia in. "You look exhausted," Margaret said, her voice tinged with concern. "I need answers," Sophia replied, walking straight to the living room where her father was reading the morning paper. Charles looked up, his usual composed demeanor faltering as he saw the determination in her eyes. "What's this about?" Charles asked, setting his paper aside. Sophia took a deep breath, her voice steady but cold. You said you kept tabs on Ethan. How much did you really know? Charles leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. We knew enough to keep an eye on him. After what happened with Lila Carter, we couldn't take any chances. Sophia's jaw tightened. What do you mean, what happened with Lila Carter? Do you think he was involved in her disappearance? Margaret exchanged a glance with Charles before answering. We don't have proof. But when she vanished, it raised red flags. Ethan walked away with a large settlement from their divorce, and her family suspected foul play. We didn't want to believe he was capable of something so terrible, but we couldn't ignore the possibility. Sophia's stomach churned. And you still let me marry him? We thought we could control the situation, Charles said, his tone defensive. Ethan was charming, and you seemed happy. We didn't want to interfere unless we had to. Sophia's voice rose, her anger spilling over. You gambled with my life. You thought you could control a man like that? Do you even realize what he's done since then? Charles stood, his voice firm. Sophia, we were trying to protect you. And now that you know the truth, we'll stand by you. But you need to be smart about this. If Ethan feels cornered, there's no telling what he might do. Sophia clenched her fists, her frustration simmering beneath the surface. I can't believe you kept this from me. You should have told me everything from the start. We're telling you now, Margaret said softly, placing a hand on her daughter's arm. What matters is what we do next. Sophia nodded, her anger giving way to resolve. She didn't have the luxury of wallowing in betrayal. She needed to focus on the fight ahead. Back at the penthouse, Sophia found Ethan in his home office, typing on his laptop. He looked up as she entered, his smile strained. You've been out a lot lately, he remarked. Sophia forced a casual tone. Work's been busy. You know how it is. Ethan's eyes lingered on her, as if searching for something. You're not keeping secrets from me, are you? The question sent a chill down Sophia's spine, but she maintained her composure. Of course not. What would I have to hide? Ethan studied her for another moment before turning back to his laptop. Good. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings. As she left the room, Sophia felt her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't let him suspect that she knew the truth. Not yet. That evening, Sophia called Victor to share what her parents had revealed. Victor listened intently before speaking. Your parents were right about one thing, Victor said. Ethan doesn't handle losing control well. If he feels threatened, he could lash out. I can't keep pretending everything is fine, Sophia said. He's already isolated me from my friends, from my life. I don't even recognize who I am anymore. Then it's time to start taking back control, Victor replied. We'll build a case against him, but you need to be careful. Don't let him see what you're planning. The next morning, Sophia arrived at work determined to reassert herself. For months, she had let Ethan's criticisms chip away at her confidence, but she wouldn't let him destroy her career. She spent the day meeting with clients and outlining a new initiative for sustainable investments, regaining the focus she thought she had lost. As the weeks passed, Sophia began documenting everything Ethan said and did. She recorded conversations, saved emails, and kept a journal of his behavior. Meanwhile, Victor continued digging into Ethan's past, uncovering more details about his fraudulent activities. One afternoon, Victor called with an update. I've found something, he said. Ethan's been using your name to secure loans through shell corporations. He's putting you on the hook for millions of dollars in debt. Sophia's blood ran cold. What happens if he defaults? The creditors will come after you, Victor replied. But we'll make sure it doesn't come to that. I've already started gathering evidence to prove he acted without your knowledge. Sophia's anger flared. Ethan wasn't just a liar. He was a thief, and he had put her future at risk to cover his tracks. That night, Sophia confronted Ethan during dinner. I want to talk about our finances, she said, her tone measured. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What about them? I've noticed some discrepancies, she continued. Loans I didn't authorize. Accounts I didn't open. Ethan's expression darkened. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, Sophia shot back. You've been hiding things from me, and I want to know why. Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You don't trust me? After everything I've done for us? Trust is earned, Sophia replied, her voice steady. And you've given me every reason to doubt you. Ethan's face twisted with anger. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this marriage. You think you're better than me because of your family's money? You wouldn't last a day without me. Sophia's hands trembled, but she refused to back down. This marriage isn't a partnership. It's a prison, and I'm done playing along. Ethan's expression turned cold. You'll regret this. Sophia met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. No, Ethan, you will. As he stormed out of the apartment, Sophia felt a surge of determination. For too long, she had allowed Ethan to control her life. But now, she was taking it back, piece by piece. Sophia stood in the penthouse's living room, staring at the door Ethan had slammed on his way out. The silence felt oppressive, but the tension in her chest had shifted. For the first time, she had confronted him head-on, refusing to cower under his manipulative tactics. Yet, her resolve didn't erase the growing danger. Ethan's chilling parting words, "You'll regret this," played on a loop in her mind. Sophia knew Ethan wouldn't give up control easily. He thrived on power, and her defiance was a direct threat to his carefully constructed facade. It was no longer a question of if he would retaliate, but how. She needed to be ready. The next morning, Sophia met Victor at his office. His workspace was small and unassuming, tucked into a nondescript building in the city's industrial district. The modest setting contrasted sharply with the intensity of his work. Victor leaned back in his chair, his piercing eyes fixed on Sophia as she recounted the events of the previous night. "He's unraveling," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the unease simmering beneath it. "I pushed him, and he snapped. I know he's planning something." Victor nodded, his expression grave. "Ethan doesn't seem like the type to let go without a fight. But we're making progress. I've uncovered more details about his connections to Carter Development Group." Sophia leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "What did you find?" Victor slid a folder across the desk. "Carter Development is a front. It's linked to a network of shell companies Ethan's been using to funnel money. But here's the real kicker. He's tied to a criminal syndicate that specializes in financial fraud and money laundering. They're dangerous, Sophia, and Ethan's been in deep with them for years." Sophia felt her breath catch. "Dangerous how?" Victor's jaw tightened. "These aren't just white-collar criminals. They've been connected to extortion, threats, and even violent acts to silence people who get in their way. If Ethan feels cornered, he might try to use them to intimidate you, or worse." Sophia's stomach churned. "So, what do we do?" "We keep building the case," Victor said firmly. "I've been compiling evidence to show the extent of his fraud. If we can tie him to the syndicate, we'll have leverage to take him down. But you need to be cautious. He's not just fighting to protect his image. He's protecting himself from people who won't hesitate to hurt him if he fails." Sophia nodded, the weight of Victor's words sinking in. "I'm not backing down, Victor. Whatever it takes, I'm going to see this through." That evening, Sophia returned home to find the penthouse eerily quiet. Ethan wasn't there, and part of her was relieved. She poured herself a glass of wine and sank onto the couch, letting her thoughts drift. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Angela. "Hey," Sophia answered, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about you," Angela said, concern lacing her tone. "How are you holding up?" Sophia hesitated, then sighed. "It's been a lot." Victor found more evidence. "Ethan's connected to some very dangerous people." Angela was silent for a moment before speaking. "Sophia, you don't have to go through this alone. You know that, right? Whatever you need, I'm here." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. "Thank you, Ange. That means more than you know." "I mean it," Angela said firmly. "You're stronger than he ever gave you credit for. Don't forget that." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia worked closely with Victor and Monica, her divorce attorney, to prepare for the legal battle ahead. They gathered financial records, tracked Ethan's transactions, and documented his manipulative behavior. But as they closed in on Ethan's schemes, his retaliation began. It started subtly. Sophia noticed disapproving glances from colleagues and overheard whispers in the office. Her reputation, once untouchable, was suddenly under scrutiny. Then came the phone calls. Clients she had worked with for years began pulling their accounts, citing vague concerns about her trustworthiness. Finally, an article appeared online. The headline read, "Heiress or Fraudster? Allegations surface against Sophia Johnson." Sophia stared at the screen, her hands trembling with fury. The article painted her as a spoiled, ungrateful wife who had fabricated claims against her devoted husband. It cited anonymous sources claiming she was difficult to work with and implied her professional success was entirely due to her family's wealth. She slammed her laptop shut, her heart racing. "Ethan's trying to destroy me," Sophia told Victor during their next meeting. "He's panicking," Victor replied. "He knows we're close to exposing him, so he's going after your credibility. But this smear campaign could backfire if we use it to our advantage." "How?" Sophia asked, desperate for a way to fight back. "We leak what we have," Victor said. "Just enough to show the world who Ethan really is. We'll control the narrative before he has a chance to spin it further." The plan went into motion. Monica reached out to a trusted journalist, providing carefully vetted evidence of Ethan's fraudulent activities. The journalist published a detailed exposé, revealing Ethan's connection to the criminal syndicate and his history of manipulation. The article went viral, shifting public opinion almost overnight. People began questioning Ethan's character, and support for Sophia surged. But Ethan wasn't finished. One night, Sophia returned home to find the penthouse ransacked. Papers were scattered, drawers overturned, and her laptop was missing. Her heart pounded as she called Victor. "He's getting desperate," Victor said. "He's trying to intimidate you. But this is good. It means we're closing in." Sophia's voice shook. "What if he does something worse?" "Then we'll be ready," Victor assured her. Sophia refused to let Ethan's intimidation tactics break her. She focused on her work, her legal case, and the foundation she was quietly planning to launch, a resource for women facing financial and emotional abuse. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was preparing his next move. And she was right. Late one night, Sophia received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You don't know who you're messing with." The email contained a single attachment, a photo of her parents' estate, taken from a distance. Sophia's blood ran cold. Ethan was escalating, and the stakes had never been higher. Sophia stared at the email, her breath caught in her throat. The photo of her parents' estate was grainy but unmistakable. The angle suggested it had been taken from the tree line bordering the property, a warning that someone had been close enough to spy on them. Her hands trembled as she forwarded the email to Victor and Monica, adding a single line. "We need to talk. Now." Moments later, her phone buzzed. It was Victor. "I saw the email," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't just intimidation. It's a threat. Ethan's letting you know he has resources to hurt the people you care about." Sophia swallowed hard. "What do we do?" "First, we ensure your parents' safety," Victor replied. "I'll arrange for private security at their estate. Second, we use this. This email is evidence of intent. It strengthens our case and puts Ethan in a worse position if he escalates further." Sophia nodded, even though Victor couldn't see her. "Do you think he'll stop?" Victor paused. "Men like Ethan don't stop until they're forced to. We're getting close, Sophia. He's desperate. That's when he's most dangerous." Sophia drove to her parents' estate early the next morning. As she pulled up the long driveway, the sight of private security guards patrolling the grounds offered a small measure of comfort. Inside, her parents were waiting in the living room, their faces etched with concern. "What's going on, Sophia?" Charles asked, his tone clipped. Sophia held up her phone, showing him the email. "Ethan's escalating. He's trying to intimidate me by going after you." Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "This has gone too far." "I've already arranged for security," Sophia assured them. "Victor's team is monitoring everything, and Monica is using this as part of the legal case. But I need you both to be vigilant. Don't trust anyone, and don't leave the estate without security." Charles's jaw tightened. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect you, Sophia. But are you safe?" Sophia hesitated. "I'm being careful. I've taken precautions. But I can't let Ethan see that he's getting to me." Her father nodded, his stern demeanor softening. You've always been strong, Sophia. You'll get through this. Back at the penthouse, Sophia found Ethan waiting for her. He was seated on the couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy," he remarked, his tone dangerously calm. Sophia placed her bag on the counter, keeping her movements deliberate. "So have you." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is there something you want to say?" "Not yet," Sophia replied evenly, meeting his gaze. "But I think it's only fair to warn you. I'm not the same woman you married." Ethan chuckled darkly, taking a sip of his drink. "We'll see about that." Over the next week, Ethan's behavior grew more erratic. He began staying out late, making cryptic phone calls, and avoiding direct conversations with Sophia. She knew he was planning something, but his unpredictability made him even more dangerous. Meanwhile, Victor and Monica continued building their case. Monica had filed a motion to freeze Ethan's assets, citing his fraudulent activities and the threat of further financial harm to Sophia. The court granted the motion, tightening the noose around Ethan's schemes. "He's going to lash out," Victor warned during one of their meetings. "He's losing his grip, and men like him don't handle that well." Sophia nodded. "What can I do?" "Stay vigilant," Victor said, "and keep documenting everything. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position." The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Sophia was working late in her office when she heard the front door slam. Ethan's heavy footsteps echoed through the penthouse, and moments later, he appeared in the doorway. His usually polished appearance was disheveled, his tie undone, his hair mussed. But it was the look in his eyes that set off alarm bells in Sophia's mind. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and cold. Sophia stood, keeping the desk between them. "About what?" "About you trying to ruin my life," Ethan snapped, stepping closer. "I'm protecting myself," Sophia replied calmly. "Something you should have done instead of lying, stealing, and manipulating." Ethan's face twisted with anger. "You don't understand how hard I've worked to build this. Everything I've done has been for us. For us." Sophia scoffed. "You've put me in debt, isolated me from my friends, and tried to control every aspect of my life. That's not love, Ethan. That's abuse." Ethan slammed his fist on the desk, making Sophia flinch. "You think you're so perfect? You think you're better than me? You're nothing without your family's money. You've never had to work for anything in your life." Sophia's fear gave way to fury. "You're wrong. I've worked for everything I have, and I'll be damned if I let you take it from me." Ethan's eyes burned with rage, but before he could respond, Sophia held up her phone. "I've recorded everything, Ethan. Every threat, every lie. It's over." For a moment, Ethan looked stunned. Then, his expression darkened. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Get out," Sophia said, her voice firm. "Leave this apartment. Leave my life, or I'll make sure you regret it." Ethan stared at her, his jaw clenched, before turning on his heel and storming out. As the door slammed behind him, Sophia let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. She knew this wasn't the end. Ethan wouldn't go down without a fight, but she also knew she was ready for whatever came next. That night, Sophia called Victor. "He's out," she said, "but I don't think he's done." "He's not," Victor replied, "but neither are we. I've just uncovered something that could be the final nail in his coffin. Meet me tomorrow." Sophia hung up, a flicker of hope igniting within her. She had come too far to back down now. Ethan's web of lies was unraveling, and she was determined to see it torn apart completely. Sophia arrived at Victor's office early the next morning, her determination sharpening with each passing moment. Despite the sleepless night, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan's outburst the night before had made one thing clear. He was unraveling, and she had the upper hand. Victor greeted her with a nod, motioning for her to sit. His desk was cluttered with papers and a laptop displaying rows of financial documents. "We're closing in," Victor said, tapping a file. "I've found more evidence that ties Ethan directly to Carter Development Group and the criminal syndicate he's been working with." Sophia leaned forward, her heart pounding. "What kind of evidence?" Victor opened the file, revealing a series of emails. These are communications between Ethan and a man named Dominic Vargas. Vargas is one of the key players in the syndicate. The emails discuss transferring money through shell companies and laundering funds through investments under your name. Sophia stared at the emails, her anger flaring. He's been using me as a shield this whole time. Victor nodded. Exactly. But these emails prove his intent. They show he was fully aware of the illegality of his actions and that he deliberately involved you to cover his tracks. Sophia's jaw tightened. How do we use this? Victor leaned back in his chair. We give it to Monica. This evidence will bolster the divorce case and open the door for criminal charges. Ethan's financial house of cards is about to collapse. Later that day, Sophia met Monica at her law firm. The polished office exuded professionalism with its glass walls and sleek furniture. Monica, as always, was impeccably dressed, her sharp eyes scanning the documents Victor had provided. This is solid, Monica said, her tone decisive. With these emails, we can argue not only for a swift divorce settlement, but also for restitution. Ethan's actions have caused significant financial and emotional harm, and we'll make sure the court sees that. What about the criminal charges? Sophia asked. Monica's expression hardened. That's where it gets tricky. The evidence we have is strong, but prosecuting someone with connections to a criminal syndicate can be dangerous. We'll need to involve federal authorities to ensure your safety. Sophia nodded, her resolve unwavering. Do whatever it takes. I'm not backing down. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Monica filed motions to introduce the new evidence, while Victor coordinated with law enforcement to ensure Sophia's safety. Sophia, in turn, began rebuilding her professional and personal life. She reached out to clients who had distanced themselves during Ethan's smear campaign, explaining her side of the story. Slowly but surely, they began to return, their trust in her rekindled. Angela remained a constant source of support, often dropping by Sophia's office with coffee and encouragement. You're incredible, you know that? Angela said one afternoon. Most people would have crumbled under the pressure, but you're standing taller than ever. Sophia smiled, her gratitude genuine. I wouldn't have made it this far without you. Angela's grin widened. Damn right. Now let's keep it that way. Ethan, however, wasn't going quietly. He had been served with the divorce papers and the motion to freeze his assets, and his response was swift and vindictive. Sophia began receiving anonymous messages, thinly veiled threats warning her to drop the case. Her car was keyed outside her office, and a brick was thrown through the window of her parents' estate. Victor and Monica took every precaution, increasing security and notifying law enforcement of the escalating threats. This is desperation, Monica said during a late-night strategy session. Ethan knows he's losing, so he's trying to intimidate you into backing down. He'll fail, Sophia said firmly. I've come too far to stop now. The turning point came during a deposition. Ethan, flanked by his high-priced attorney, sat across from Sophia in a sterile conference room. His once polished demeanor was fraying, his confidence undermined by the mounting evidence against him. Sophia, on the other hand, was calm and composed. She answered each question with clarity and precision, her strength shining through. When Monica presented the emails linking Ethan to the syndicate, his attorney visibly faltered. These documents show that Mr. Taylor not only engaged in fraudulent activities, but also placed his wife in financial jeopardy by using her name without her consent, Monica said, her tone firm. This is not just a divorce case. It's a matter of criminal intent. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching under the table. But he said nothing, his silence speaking volumes. After the deposition, Victor pulled Sophia aside. I've been in touch with federal authorities. They're building a case against Ethan and the syndicate. But there's something else you should know. Sophia frowned. What is it? They've been monitoring Vargas and his associates for years, Victor explained. And they believe Ethan's involvement goes deeper than just laundering money. There's evidence he was involved in blackmail and possibly even orchestrated Lila Carter's disappearance. Sophia's breath caught. You mean he might have killed her? It's a possibility, Victor said grimly. But that's for law enforcement to determine. Right now, our focus is on protecting you and ensuring Ethan faces justice. Sophia nodded, her resolve hardening. Whatever it takes, Victor. I want this to end. As the legal battle continued, Sophia began laying the groundwork for her future. She announced the launch of a foundation aimed at supporting women who had experienced financial and emotional abuse. The announcement was met with overwhelming support, with colleagues and friends applauding her courage and determination. One evening, as she reviewed plans for the foundation, her phone buzzed. It was Angela. "You're all over the news," Angela said, her voice excited. "They're calling you the face of resilience. People are finally seeing Ethan for who he really is." Sophia smiled, a sense of pride washing over her. "It's not just about me, Ange. It's about showing others that they don't have to stay silent. They can fight back." "And you're leading the charge," Angela said. "I couldn't be prouder." As Sophia prepared for the final court hearing, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She was no longer the woman who had once doubted her worth or allowed someone else to dictate her life. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. Ethan's web of lies was unraveling, and soon, it would collapse entirely. The courthouse stood tall against the morning sky, its stone facade imposing and unyielding, a fitting symbol of the justice Sophia was determined to achieve. She adjusted the collar of her blazer, took a deep breath, and stepped through the heavy doors. Inside, the air was tense with anticipation. Reporters lined the hallway, their murmurs filling the space as they jotted notes or adjusted their cameras. This wasn't just a divorce case anymore. With the evidence of Ethan's criminal connections, the trial had drawn significant public interest. Sophia spotted Monica near the courtroom, her presence a beacon of calm amid the chaos. The attorney greeted her with a firm handshake. "Are you ready?" Monica asked, her sharp eyes scanning Sophia's face. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Good," Monica said, "because today, we take the first step toward ending this for good." The courtroom was packed. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his tailored suit and confident smirk a stark contrast to the tension in his posture. His attorney shuffled through a stack of papers, whispering hurriedly in his ear. Sophia avoided Ethan's gaze as she took her seat. She had no intention of giving him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. The proceedings began with Monica's opening statement. Her voice was clear and commanding as she outlined the case against Ethan, detailing the fraudulent activities, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse he had inflicted on Sophia. "This case is not only about dissolving a marriage," Monica said, addressing the judge and jury. "It is about holding a man accountable for years of deceit and manipulation. The evidence we will present leaves no doubt as to the harm Mr. Taylor has caused." When Ethan's attorney rose to speak, he attempted to paint a very different picture. He described Ethan as a devoted husband who had been blindsided by his wife's alleged betrayal. Mr. Taylor's only crime, the attorney argued, is loving a woman who prioritized her career and family's wealth over their marriage. Sophia's hands tightened into fists under the table, but she forced herself to remain calm. The first witness to testify was Victor. His testimony was a masterclass in precision, outlining the extensive evidence he had uncovered about Ethan's financial misconduct. He presented documents showing the creation of shell corporations, the laundering of funds through accounts in Sophia's name, and the emails linking Ethan to the criminal syndicate. "This wasn't a series of innocent mistakes," Victor stated firmly. "This was a calculated effort to defraud and exploit Mrs. Johnson for financial gain." Ethan's attorney attempted to discredit Victor's findings, but Monica quickly countered, reinforcing the credibility of the evidence. Next, Monica called Sophia to the stand. As Sophia walked to the witness stand, she felt the weight of every eye in the room on her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Monica began her questioning with care, guiding Sophia through the timeline of her marriage to Ethan. "Can you describe the early days of your relationship?" Monica asked. Sophia nodded. "Ethan was charming and attentive. He made me feel like we were partners, like he supported my ambitions and respected my independence. But over time, that changed." "Changed how?" Monica prompted. Sophia's voice wavered slightly but grew stronger as she continued. "He became controlling. At first, it was subtle, comments about the way I dressed, or the time I spent with friends. Then it escalated. He isolated me from the people I cared about, took over our finances, and made me feel like I couldn't trust my own instincts. Monica presented the recording Sophia had made of Ethan's threats and manipulative behavior. The courtroom fell silent as his voice filled the room, cold and venomous. "You think you're so much better than me?" Ethan's voice snarled through the speakers. "You're nothing without your family's money. You don't know the first thing about real life?" Sophia's gaze remained fixed on the jury, refusing to look at Ethan. When it was Ethan's turn to testify, he tried to spin the narrative in his favor. He described himself as a hard-working man who had sacrificed everything for his wife, only to be repaid with betrayal. "I loved Sophia," Ethan said, his tone heavy with feigned sincerity. "But she was never satisfied. No matter what I did, it was never enough." Monica wasted no time dismantling his testimony. "You claim to have acted out of love," Monica said, her voice razor-sharp. "Yet you funneled money from joint accounts into shell corporations, created accounts in your wife's name without her knowledge, and forged her signature on loan documents. Is that what you call love?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Those were business decisions. Sophia wouldn't have understood." "Because they were illegal," Monica interrupted, her tone cutting. "Isn't that correct, Mr. Taylor?" Ethan's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The final day of the hearing was devoted to closing arguments. Monica's words were powerful, painting a clear picture of Ethan's calculated efforts to control and exploit Sophia. "Mrs. Johnson came into this marriage with trust and love," Monica said. "Mr. Taylor took advantage of that trust to further his own ambitions, all while isolating her and diminishing her sense of self. Today, we ask for justice, not just for Sophia Johnson, but for every individual who has ever been silenced by someone they thought they could trust." Ethan's attorney made one last attempt to appeal to the jury, but his arguments felt hollow compared to the mountain of evidence against his client. When the judge finally adjourned the proceedings, Sophia felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The outcome was out of her hands now, but she knew she had done everything in her power to reclaim her life and seek justice. As she left the courthouse, Angela was waiting for her outside, along with her parents and Victor. "You were incredible," Angela said, pulling Sophia into a tight hug. "You've come so far," Margaret added, tears glistening in her eyes. Charles nodded, his expression one of quiet pride. "Whatever happens now, you've already won, Sophia." And for the first time in a long time, Sophia believed it. The day of the verdict dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that should have inspired hope. But as Sophia approached the courthouse, a knot of anxiety settled in her chest. The weight of the past months, of unraveling Ethan's lies and fighting to reclaim her life, felt heavier than ever. Her parents walked beside her, their presence a steadying force. Angela had insisted on coming as well, her unyielding loyalty shining through in every reassuring smile she sent Sophia's way. "Whatever happens in there, you've done everything right," Angela said as they reached the courthouse steps. Sophia nodded, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I just want it to be over." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations. Reporters filled the back rows, their notebooks and cameras ready to capture the outcome of a case that had gripped the public's attention. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his expression guarded. He was dressed impeccably as always, but the cracks in his facade were undeniable. His confidence had eroded over the course of the trial, replaced by a simmering frustration he could no longer hide. Sophia took her seat beside Monica, who exuded her usual calm authority. "Are you ready for this?" Monica asked quietly. "Yes," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The proceedings began with a summary of the case. The judge recounted the evidence presented: Ethan's fraudulent financial activities, his manipulation of Sophia, and the overwhelming proof of his connection to a criminal syndicate. After careful review of the evidence and testimony, the judge said, her tone measured, "This court finds in favor of Mrs. Sophia Johnson." Sophia's breath caught as the judge continued. "All financial assets tied to fraudulent activity will be forfeited by Mr. Ethan Taylor. Furthermore, He is ordered to repay restitution for the financial harm inflicted upon Mrs. Johnson, including the funds he embezzled using her name. There was a ripple of murmurs throughout the courtroom, but the judge wasn't finished. In light of the evidence linking Mr. Taylor to criminal activity, this court recommends federal authorities pursue charges against him for money laundering, fraud, and any associated offenses. Ethan's attorney leapt to his feet, objecting to the decision, but the judge silenced him with a single raised hand. "This case is adjourned," she said firmly. The gavel struck, and it was over. For a moment, Sophia sat frozen, the enormity of the moment washing over her. Then Angela grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You did it," Angela whispered, her voice filled with pride. Sophia turned to Monica, who gave her a rare smile. "Justice served," the attorney said. As Sophia left the courtroom, the reporters descended, their questions coming rapid fire. "How do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you? Do you think Ethan Taylor will face prison time?" Sophia paused, holding up a hand to quiet the chaos. "I'm grateful for the court's decision," she said, her voice strong and clear. "This case wasn't just about me. It was about standing up to manipulation and abuse, and showing others that they don't have to stay silent. I'm ready to move forward, and I hope this inspires others to do the same." The reporters clamored for more, but Sophia turned and walked away, her head held high. Back at her parents' estate, a quiet celebration awaited her. The dining room table was filled with her favorite dishes, and a bottle of champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket. Margaret embraced her tightly as she entered. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thanks, Mom," Sophia replied, her own voice trembling. Charles poured the champagne, his usual stoic demeanor giving way to a rare smile. "To Sophia," he said, raising his glass, "for her strength, her courage, and her unwavering determination." "To Sophia," the others echoed, clinking their glasses together. Sophia smiled, the warmth of their support filling the void that Ethan's manipulation had created. The victory felt monumental, but Sophia knew her journey wasn't over. Ethan still faced potential criminal charges, and his connections to the syndicate made him a continued threat. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the moment, knowing she had taken a significant step toward reclaiming her life. The following days were a blur of activity. Sophia worked closely with Victor and Monica to ensure her safety while federal authorities investigated Ethan's criminal ties. She also threw herself into her work, relaunching the foundation she had put on hold during the trial. The foundation, named Second Horizons, aimed to support victims of financial and emotional abuse, offering resources and advocacy for those seeking to rebuild their lives. Sophia's story quickly became a beacon of hope. She appeared on talk shows, shared her journey in interviews, and connected with women who had faced similar struggles. Each conversation reinforced her resolve to use her experience for good. One evening, as Sophia reviewed plans for an upcoming event for the foundation, Victor called. "I have good news," he said. "Ethan's been arrested. The federal authorities have enough evidence to charge him with money laundering and fraud. He'll be facing a long legal battle and likely a lengthy sentence." Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Victor, for everything. You're the one who made this happen," Victor replied. "You stood your ground. Don't forget that." As the sun set over the city that night, Sophia stood on her balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The skyline shimmered with possibility, and for the first time in years, she felt a profound sense of peace. The scars Ethan had left would always be there, but they no longer defined her. She was stronger now, her resilience forged in the fires of adversity. Raising her glass, Sophia whispered to the quiet evening air, "To new beginnings." The day of the foundation's launch event arrived with crisp autumn air and a sense of hope that Sophia hadn't felt in years. The venue, a beautiful rooftop garden overlooking the city, was decorated with string lights and elegant floral arrangements. It was a space meant to inspire, a fitting backdrop for a night dedicated to resilience, renewal, and empowerment. Sophia arrived early, her emerald green dress flowing gracefully as she walked through the venue. Every detail had been carefully planned, from the soft jazz music playing in the background to the stories of survivors displayed on screens throughout the space. This wasn't just an event to celebrate the Foundation's beginning. It was a declaration. Sophia had not only survived but thrived. By early evening, the rooftop was alive with energy. Supporters, colleagues, friends, and survivors mingled, their conversations blending with the music. Angela, as always, was at Sophia's side, her presence a steadying force. "You pulled it off," Angela said, her voice filled with pride. "This is incredible, sophomore." Sophia smiled, glancing around the room. "It's not just me. This is for everyone who's ever felt trapped, who's ever been told they're not enough. Tonight, we show them that they are." Angela raised her glass in a toast. "To Second Horizons and to you." "To us," Sophia replied, clinking her glass against Angela's. As the evening unfolded, Sophia took the stage. The crowd fell silent, their attention fixed on her. She looked out at the faces before her, each one a reminder of the journey that had brought her here. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Sophia began, her voice steady. "This foundation was born from a place of pain, but it exists to create hope. For too long, I believed I had to face my struggles alone. But I've learned that strength isn't about going it alone. It's about reaching out, standing together, and lifting each other up." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. Second Horizons is about more than rebuilding lives. It's about creating a world where no one feels powerless, where every voice matters, and where every story is honored. Together, we can make that vision a reality. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Sophia felt a swell of emotion rise within her. As the night wound down, Sophia found a moment of solitude on the terrace. The city lights stretched out before her, a glittering reminder of endless possibilities. Her mother joined her, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You were brilliant tonight," Margaret said, her voice soft. "Your father and I couldn't be prouder." Sophia turned to face her mother, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. I know I haven't always made it easy, but you and Dad never gave up on me." Margaret reached out, placing a hand on Sophia's cheek. "Because we knew how strong you were, even when you didn't. And watching you step into that strength has been the greatest gift of all." Sophia leaned into her mother's embrace, the moment filling a part of her that had once felt empty. In the weeks that followed, the foundation gained traction, its impact spreading quickly. Sophia's story resonated with people from all walks of life, and donations poured in, enabling the launch of new programs and resources. Sophia herself felt a renewed sense of purpose. She traveled to meet with survivors, listened to their stories, and shared her own journey in hopes of inspiring others to reclaim their power. But she also made time for herself, something she hadn't done in years. She found joy in simple pleasures, exploring new cities, trying new foods, and spending quiet evenings with friends and family. One afternoon, Sophia received an email from Monica. The subject line read, "Case closed." Opening it, Sophia learned that Ethan had accepted a plea deal. He would serve time for his crimes and face significant financial penalties. It was a fitting end to a chapter that had once seemed impossible to close. Sophia forwarded the email to Angela, adding a single line, "We did it." Months later, Sophia stood in her apartment, surrounded by the souvenirs of a life reclaimed. Framed photos from her travels adorned the walls, and her desk was cluttered with plans for the Foundation's next initiative. As she gazed at the city skyline, a knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Angela, holding a bottle of wine and wearing her signature grin. "Thought we could celebrate," Angela said, stepping inside. "What's the occasion?" Sophia asked, laughing. "Do we need one?" Angela replied, "You're happy, thriving, and making a difference. That's reason enough." Sophia poured them each a glass, her heart full as they toasted to the journey they had shared. Later that night, Sophia returned to the balcony, her glass in hand. The city stretched out before her, a reminder of how far she had come. For years, she had lived in the shadow of someone else's control, doubting her worth and silencing her own voice. But now, she stood tall, unafraid to take up space in the world. "To new beginnings," she whispered, raising her glass to the night sky. The future was hers, and she was ready to embrace it fully.